Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brody Consulting Group. To get more information about our publishing and coaching services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brody, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Jim Yoakum, author of The Christians. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Are you ready to get started?
I'm ready, yeah.
All right. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
I would probably give two pieces of advice. The first is don't edit as you go, which a lot of people do, and then they get frustrated and then they stop writing. Just throw it down on paper. Let the process dictate where you're going, what's the story going to be. Just avoid that idea that you're going to go back and fix it later. And two, I would say don't really ever wait for inspiration. Just keep writing. Even if it's bad, just keep going and work out your blocks or story conflicts on paper. You know, the writing is about writing, and don't follow trends. You know, vampires are hot today. Mummies will be by the time your book's out, so it's outdated. So write stuff that you believe in, and just basically the main is just write, don't edit. Do that later. You know, just keep going.
Absolutely. That's always my philosophy. Just get it done and then clean it up after that.
Exactly.
Well, what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Well, you know, in some ways I think it's easier to get published these days, but I assume you're talking about the traditional route. I think starting out as a new writer, I think the hardest part is having the nerve to believe you wrote something worthy of being published, and then sending it off to be judged, which is a great leap of faith and courage and confidence. But to be honest, I think a lot of this, the hardest part of being published is the system itself. I think the traditional publishing system is over 100 years old, and it was set up in a certain way that doesn't necessarily, it still works, but it's not the only way today. The democracy of the internet has seen to that, like it has with the music business and other things. So you can be published if you want to go the traditional route, you know, getting an agent and chop it that way. That's fine. I've done that. I've gone that route before. And traditional publishers, really these days, to be honest, if you don't get an advance or you do, that probably will be the only money you'll ever see. You have to earn back everything they do for you. You know, cover work, you know, book tour, whatever they do supposedly for you, you earn back. So before you see any more money, you got to pay all that back. So there's good and bad to it. They can get you in the traditional stores, but that's changing too. I publish now through Amazon, through a thing now. It used to be called CreateSpace. It's then been called KDP Print. There I have full freedom over the content, the cover art. I make more per book than I would through any regular publishing outlet. So it's really democratized publishing. But to answer the question verbatim, the hardest part about getting published, I think, is getting over the idea that you aren't worthy of being published. You aren't worthy of being heard. And, you know, yes, you're going to be judged, but that's okay. If you can't handle you can't handle the heat, get out of the kitchen. But you just got to be willing to finish it, put it out there, and let it fall. Well, you see what happens.
So you went the self-publishing route, is that correct?
Well, no, I disagree with that term. Self-publishing indicates vanity publishing. Vanity publishing is self-publishing, and that means you're paying to have your book produced. Through the KDP plan, I don't pay anything. It doesn't cost a dime for anything. I only make money. Now, granted, I do a lot more work than I would otherwise, but I have more control. I have been given covers for some of my books through traditional publishers that were horrible. I hated, but they said, that's your cover. You know, and they've edited things out that I wanted to keep, and they said, well, that's too bad. That's what we're going to do. So I had no say. So I have now that say. Now you would say, okay, now what about promotion and all that? Well, the times I've done traditional publishing, the promotion was minimal. You're not, unless you're
Yep.
John Grisham, you're not going to get any kind of promotion. Minimal. And if they do put you on a book tour, you got to pay that back. They're sending you around Southeast or wherever. You got to pay that back. So you're not really being given anything. So the point is, you get more control and you get more money. And I don't call it self-publishing at all. I call it independent publishing.
Good.
Through Amazon, because that's really not. They're my publisher. They are my distributor. They are my publisher, and it's the way of the world, the way things are going, and that's the way. If you're interested in having more control and making more money per book, then that's the smartest way to go. There's nothing wrong with traditional publishing at all. There's some great things they can do, but it's very, very. The landscape's very changing right now, and it's like the early days of the internet with music. Now everybody goes, I'm an indie band, and we sell our own CDs, and everybody applauds. Great for you. But sometimes it's like a stigma if you say, yes, I'm publishing, independently. Oh, you can't sell your book, huh? It's like a stigma, and it's not at all, because it's just the way things are going. It's going with film, it's going with music, it's going with books. It's just the new way. So, really, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's democratized publishing.
No, I agree completely, and I absolutely love that you said that, because I refer to it as indie or on demand. But you're right, so there is sometimes a stigma with it, and I'm just like, why is there a stigma with that? All 13 of my books, I went through that route where I went through, I did it myself, and then I created my own publishing company, and I went through that as we progressed. But the funny thing is, it's the same thing as essentially going through a traditional publisher. The main difference is you have the control, you have the rights, and you can get that book out as soon as a week or two from now if you wanted to. You don't have to wait for 6 months to a year and a half. You have that control. Plus, it's with it in your grasp. You're the one who actually is going to get the lion's share of the royalties. So, Jim, I couldn't agree more with you, and I love that you have that view, because sometimes when you use the word self-published, there are people who are like, really? I'm like, listen, it's the same thing as anything else, but the difference is, just like with traditional publishing, you're still have to do the lion's share of the marketing yourself. So why not do it yourself?
Okay.
And you have the creative control. You can, as you mentioned with the book cover, you can choose whatever cover you want. And I will put any self-published book, at least the ones that I've done through and the ones that I've done with my clients, I'll put that against any of the big five, because the product is just as good.
Yeah, the point is it's more controlled. It's democratized publishing, which it needed to be. The monopoly needs to be broken up, and that's where I've gone, and I've got no regrets, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And the nice thing is you can actually market the book yourself, and it's on you at the end of the day. So whether the book's going to be successful or not, you have that control. And that's one thing I really like about it. And that's going to transition really nicely into our next question, and that is about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that worked well.
Well, what I find really works well is still the old-fashioned networking, either in person, certainly social media, but you've got to know how to use it correctly to build an audience and not just start plugging your books, because that's not how it works. You don't want to come off as a barker. You're just building an audience. You may be talking about other things on social media, but people go, oh, I like you, and they follow you, then they read about you, and they find that you build it's a slow process, but you build an audience versus trying to sell. So the way that I've marketed myself really over the last few years is really more as I hate to say personality, but it's not me just saying, hey, I'm a writer by my books. Here I am, here's my point of view on a number of topics, whatever is being talked about. If you agree with me, you probably will like the things I write, and then, that's worked a lot. It's a slow go, but it's better than going on there and just ranting, buy my books, because people get turned off. So if that's a marketing strategy or not, I suppose it is, but it's aside from maybe going out and purchasing ads somewhere, which I'm not sure really work for books as such, I think the best thing is to create a fan base of sorts, and then they will discover your work. So there's no guarantee any of this works marketing wise. But I find it smarter to do it that way.
Well, and you bring up a great point too. You always have to add value. It's just like when you're networking in person, where you need to find out more about the other person and developing a relationship that way. And I feel the same way with social media, where you're actually wanting to help other people, and then that comes back in, because you're right. If you're just barking and pitching, that's not going to get the job done.
No, they'll turn you off.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So, what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Well, there were actually about 3 books that really affected me growing up, quite diverse in a way, but not. White Fang by Jack London, Lord of the Flies by William Golden, and Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. They kind of each taught me something about life and good writing. But I think of all of those, the Catch-22 is probably my Bible, and I would say that it really taught me that you can write a novel that's both true and real and yet be absolutely absurd at the same time and make it work. And that's what that book really is. It taught me about how people are, how we interact or don't interact, how we do or do not hear what other people are saying, and just the absurdity of life, And also, that book really was so challenging at the time it came out. It respected the reader to come to it. It didn't pander to the reader. It just said, here I am reading, you can read this. And it didn't talk down to the reader and it made the reader come to them, brought them up. And it taught me how to write good conversation in books, how to get your point across without making stilted. So it taught me good writing, and that what you leave out is as important as what you say in a book, because you're respecting your reader to be along with you and make those leaps with you. So the worst I've ever really come across is dialogue that just screams exposition, which is, yes, it is exposition, but you shouldn't be aware necessarily that it's what it is, because that's not how people talk. Naturally, it will tell you the story and unfold in its way. And the reader, you respect them and they say, okay, this is how I'm telling the story. I trust you'll come along on this journey. And, hopefully they do. But it really taught me that that's a way you can write and be still successful. And that book was very revolutionary at its time. Almost, people were having arguments about it. Well, it's absurd. It's not real. But it was a new way to write. And I think that really affected me. So I'd say Catch-22.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
That's a tough one. I have several that I really like, but I think because of the way my career is generated with writing with Monty Python's Graham Chapman and other things like that, in the humor, absurd, black comedy way. In fact, most of my books are, not all, but generally most. The Christians has got some black comedy, but it's mainly a serious story. So, but on that realm, I'd say that my favorite quote is from Graham Greene, and he wrote, "Somebody always leaves a banana skin on the scene of a tragedy." And I think that really is just saying, however great we think we are, however perfect or smart or clever, we're really just buffoon apes that leave banana peels. We're not perfect people, and we're our own worst enemies at times. And so don't take yourself so seriously all the time, because you're really just a human being, fallible, and really you're just a monkey that's leaving banana skins that will trip you up. So I would say that was probably a quote that's really stayed with me.
Well, Jim, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Well, aside from my book, the books and stuff on Amazon, I'm on Twitter at The Archivist, where I spouse off on all kind of topics that may or may not entertain. That's probably the best. I don't Facebook anymore after all the nonsense about them. So follow me and The Archivist on Twitter would be.
Well, Jim, thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your off the journey ahead.
Well, thank you very much. It was a real pleasure.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.